Today is October 20, 2020, and we're at the home of Dennis W. Langkos in St. John's, Michigan, doing a veterans history interview. Denny, can you give us your full name?
It's Dennis Wayne Langkos.
And how do you spell your last name?
L-A-N-G-K-O-S.
And what is your date of birth and place of birth?
May 26th, 1944, at Amery, that's A-M-E-R-Y, Wisconsin.
And your current address?
7821 West Price Road, St. John's, Michigan, 48879.
And my name as interviewer is Wally or Wallace Erickson. That's E-R-I-C-H-S-E-N. And I'm a volunteer interviewer with the History Department at Grand Valley State University, Allendale, Michigan. And we're doing this interview under the auspices of the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress, Washington, D.C. I am both the camera operator and the audio operator on this interview. Dennis, what branch of service were you in?
United States Marine Corps.
And when did you serve?
I initially served as a Platoon Leader Class in the summer of 1966, which had been by the middle of June through sometime in August 1966 when I first had any association with the Marine Corps. And then I actually entered on active duty in the latter part of January 1967.
Okay. Then what was your military specialty then?
My MOS was, I forgot it now, 7562, which was a CH-46 pilot.
And where did you serve?
Well, I've started out at Naval Air Station Pensacola for flight training in January '67, and I got my wings in May 1968. From there, I was transferred to Marine Corps Air Station Santa Ana, which is in California, and then from there I was transferred to South Vietnam, and that was in October 1968. I served there until October 1969, at which time I was transferred to Marine Corps Air Station New River, North Carolina, where I completed my active duty service.
And what was your highest rank then?
Captain.
Captain, okay. Let me back up a bit here, Denny, to your hometown. Where were you from?
Centuria, Wisconsin, which is in northwest Wisconsin. The farm that I was raised on, it's about 100 miles south of Duluth, Superior. And it's in Polk County, P-O-L-K County. And my parents operated an 80-acre dairy farm there.
So you had cows?
We had dairy cows, yes.
What kind?
Holsteins. Is there any other?
I know. How many cows did you have?
Well, we had 20 milk cows. It was a small dairy farm, but it's typical of the farms in that area at the time. Those farms in this day and age are non-existent. In addition, my mother worked outside the home part-time as a linotype operator at a local hometown newspaper called the Platoon Leader. And my dad also worked outside the farm at the Polk County Cooperative. It was a Farm Bureau Cooperative located in Balsam Lake, Wisconsin.
Do you have any siblings?
Yes, I have two sisters. They're both surviving. My oldest, I'm the middle child. I've got an older sister who's 2 years older, Audrey, She's a widow. And then I've got a younger sister, Marlis. She is 74. She lives in Woodbury, Minnesota, which is a suburb of St. Paul. And my older sister lives in rural Centuria. Actually, it's closer to Balsam Lake, but she's within 5 miles of where we were raised. That's where we live.
Okay. Where did you go to college then?
I went to school at Wisconsin State University at River Falls.
Okay. And what was your major there?
I majored in mathematics, minored in chemistry. I played football on the football team for 4 years, and I also wrestled on a wrestling team when I was a freshman there.
What made you decide on the Marine Corps?
Well, when I was in, my plans were to join the military, and I wanted to become a pilot. But as of the time I signed up for the PLC program, I hadn't made any active inquiries as far as where to go, or whether it be Army or. But anyway, one day I'm walking through the student union, and there was a Marine recruiter there.
In his blues.
In his blues, that's right. And I knew that some of my fellow teammates on the football team had signed up for the PLC program. So I stopped and asked a few questions and told him I was interested in aviation. And he says, well, you're going to have to pass the test. Why don't I give you the test right now? So I passed the test and signed up that day. And that would have been sometime in the latter part of 1965. And my first experience with anything, in the program was this recruiter later made arrangements for his recruits to fly down to Pensacola. And so one weekend, I think it was on a Friday, we had arranged to load us all up into a C-119 flying boxcar. And that was the first time I'd ever flown in an aircraft.
A piston plane, right?
Piston plane, 2 engines. It's kind of a loud, rough ride, if I remember right. And I think one of the stops we made is at Marine Corps Supply Depot, Albany, Georgia, I think, on the way down. And then we went from there to Pensacola, spent the weekend, and flew back. And then in the summer of 1966 is when I went to Quantico for the actual 10 weeks of PLC training.
What does PLC stand for?
Platoon Leader Class. Actually, I was PLC-A, which stands for aviation.
Okay.
And one of the things that sticks out in my mind is things, what do you remember? And I remember flying into Washington National from the Twin Cities, from Minneapolis, St. Paul, and walking through the airport there. All of a sudden, this guy grabs me and says, "Go over that way." I'm thinking, who is this guy? And he was a Marine. I'm thinking, how did this guy know I'm here for this training? But it seemed to know, I don't know if it was the cut of my jib or what. But anyway, they loaded us all onto the bus and took us down to Quantico, where we spent the next 10 weeks.
The PLC program, was that between like your junior and senior year in college? Or?
Well, if you signed up early enough, you could go for 2 sessions, two different summers of 5 weeks each. But since I was already into my senior year, I had to go to 10 weeks. The choice, the option was 10 weeks. That was it.
To get it done. It was the equivalent of officer candidate school, is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. What do you remember about that? What kind of drill instructors did you have?
They were great, really. And I took the attitude going in that I was in Charlie Company, 1st Platoon Charlie Company at Quantico there, main side. And I just had to take the attitude that I'm not the only guy here. And if those other guys can do this, I can do this. And so there's several memories I have. Obviously, you know, sometimes you felt picked on, and then sometimes you wonder why they're doing this to me, you know. But for example, in the pugil stick training, you know, I could handle myself. And even though I only weighed like 180, 185 pounds, it seemed like I got picked to take on the guys from 2nd Platoon or 3rd Platoon or 4th Platoon. And I can remember there was a guy in this other platoon that was a linebacker at Notre Dame. And I got him the first time. But then after that, it was all I could handle.
Now, you had played football in
And I
college,
played
right?
football, so I was athletic also.
Right.
You know, but this guy had size over me, you know, and I could handle the physical part, you know. And I can remember one time, though, that we went on an extended conditioning hike, and if you know what that is. And so we were at the beginning of the hill trail. We went through the hill trail and all around and this and that, and stopped. And I was in bad shape. You know, I was thinking, hey man, you know, like I took a leak and my urine was dark yellow. I'm thinking, man, I need some nourishment here, or I'm dehydrated. And he says, anybody here don't think they can make it again? And I'm thinking, man, I don't know if I can do this again or not, because I'm running out of energy here. But I didn't say anything. And then as it turned out, a few guys raised their hand. And they took note of who those guys were. And, but I didn't say a word. And then they said, okay, back to the barracks, you know.
That was the end of it.
Yeah, and a couple of times, you know, like one of the drill instructors said, Langkos, I want you to take your entrenching tool and go dig me some worms. I'm going to go fishing this weekend. And it was, well, what do? You go try to dig them some worms, you know. And so you're out there digging, and then there's an inspection. And then before they even get to me, Langkos, your entrenching tool's rusty and dirty. And I'm going, yeah, you know why it's dirty, you know.
Backing up, Denny, though, did you find any worms?
I probably did, you know, but and then another time I can remember, you know, those are the things that stick out in your memory way back then, and so we were on some kind of training exercise, and they give you these blank firing attachments on the M14, and right in the middle of this whole thing, my bolt just comes apart. And so I'm thinking, you know, so my drill instructor says, just go bang, bang, bang. So, and I don't know why the bolt, because they tell you not to take the bolt apart. You know, that's one thing you don't take apart. And you know, like take everything apart, but don't touch that bolt, you know?
Right.
And so that was like on a Friday or Thursday or something like that. But anyway, so after the exercise is over, when it happened, I told the sergeant instructor, hey, this bolt came apart, you know. And so we're having an inspection the next day, and the captain, the company commander, is going to be the inspecting officer. And I was fairly quick with my hands. And so he went to grab the rifle, and I kind of beat him to the draw and got my arms down, and he just about dropped my rifle, you know. And so he's pissed because he's been showed up a little bit, see. and so he goes, what kind of BS is this, Langkos? What do you mean, sir? He says, your bolt. Where are all the parts of the bolt? He knew damn well where they were. and so I said, "Sir, my bolt, the parts of my bolt are in my pocket." And he says, "Are you shitting me?" I says, "No, sir." I said, "They're in my pocket." I said, "This rifle came apart yesterday out in the field." "No, they didn't. You tried to take that bolt apart." "No, sir." And it's back and forth, you know. He says, he finally looks at the drill instructor who's standing right next to him. "Is this all true?" And the guy goes, you know. And so that was the end of that little. But he knew.
He passed inspection.
Yeah, going into it, he knew darn well that when he got to Langkos, that he was going to. His bolt was messed up.
So did they finally give you a new bolt?
I don't remember, but we took it to the armory, and it probably they fixed it, you know. But
Yeah.
you know, a couple other memories, you know, about making the hikes and stuff like that. And when I got in the Fleet Marine Force, you know, I met up with a couple guys who were in my platoon. I'm thinking, they offered these guys commissions. They never made one hike. And I was kind of disappointed about that, you know. I says, hey, I busted my balls trying to make, you know, even though I stretched physically to make them, and these guys dropped down all kinds of hikes. I said, I'm surprised seeing him here, you know, but hey, whatever, you know.
Now, through PLC then, were you was it an aviation PLC, or
No, we were all mixed up together.
all mixed?
There were guys that in my platoon that also had aviation contracts that I've ran across, you know, since then, that were also aviators. So
And the others were going to be ground officers then?
yeah. You either went to Pensacola when you got your commission, or went to basic school, you know.
Which was there at Quantico, is that right?
But I'm going to take that back a little bit. I don't know if the guys that had regular commissions, if they went to basic school, whether they're going to Pensacola or not, because I know I ran across guys at Pensacola who had gone to basic school. Well, Sam Kelly, one,
Right.
you know, so.
Then let me ask you about your drill instructors. What kind of people were they?
Well, I'll tell you, we had two sets of drill instructors. When we arrived, and there was a couple of guys there, sergeants, and they called them the drill instructor and the platoon sergeant or whatever, but
Platoon sergeant and then
drill instructor. or
sergeant
whatever.
instructor. Yeah.
And it seemed like that first night and the first morning, said, you know, these guys aren't too bad. It didn't take long though, but they were gone. Then the guys that were there for the rest of the 10 weeks, they a little more of control, a little harder on us. And I still remember both of them. There was this career Marine, at least the one was I perceived to be a career Marine.
Mhm.
And I can remember one time he came up there and he says, who can do the most push-ups? Who can do more pull-ups than I can? And so another guy that was there, matter of fact, it became a special agent named Ray Campos, Hispanic guy. He says, let me try. And so he says, okay, Campos, get up there. And so I don't remember how many Campos did, but then he got up there and he had a big cigar and so on. And then his utilities and the t-shirt, and he just slowly did them, boom, 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 and did one more. You know, and that was it. But then the other guy was kind of a slick guy, you know, and not that it makes any difference now, but a black guy. And I can remember he was showing us something one day, like involved in running and assuming the crawl, you know, with the rifle in your hand. And he demonstrated that. He says, okay, who wants to see that again? And of course, some guys were, yeah, okay. And the guy goes, bullshit, you go do it. but yeah, I can still remember him to this day. You know, certainly had no contact with them after PLCs. But the two guys, you can't forget them, you know. And so, but yeah, it was it was something different from a young farm boy from Centuria, Wisconsin, you know.
Did you keep in contact with your fellow trainees in PLC, or
I'll tell you
run into
what,
them later?
there were some guys I ran into, but as far as people that were in my platoon at that time, I don't know how many of them survived the war. And of course, you're there for 10 weeks and all, you're there at times. You're still going to school, you still have your friends back home, and it's not like you'd been in combat with them or anything like that, you know. But sorry to say, I have not been in contact with those 40-some people that we started with. It's just the way it was at the time, you know. And maybe it was that I wasn't the type of guy that I probably knew I'd never run across these guys again, because they're from 45 guys from probably 45 different states, you know. And
Then when were you commissioned? After the PLC?
January 1967.
Okay. That was right after the training then, or after college?
Well, I finished PLCs in August of '66, and then I did to get my final credits that I needed to be eligible for graduation. I was an intern teacher in Newcastle, Wyoming. And the reason I did that was I was supposed to practice teach for 10 weeks to get my final credits. But the director of the School of Education was also an assistant football coach. This is a very low-key program at the time, okay? And so he called, and I already started helping coach at Amory, Wisconsin, and I was staying at home during this time. I was scheduled to, and so I already started to coach there. And I got a call from him one day, and he says, "My brother-in-law is superintendent of education in Newcastle, Wyoming. He needs a math teacher, and it pays for the semester $2,200. Would you be interested in going?" I said, "Sure." You know, $2,200 compared to 10 weeks for nothing. So I ended up intern teaching at Newcastle, Wyoming for a semester, and then that completed my requirements to graduate. And so I was, even though I didn't walk at that time, I never walked. So then in January of '67, after that semester was over, you know, I got orders, got sworn in, and drove directly to Pensacola.
So in January of '67, you went to Pensacola then
Right.
for flight training then?
And without any uniforms or anything, showed up at the gate with...
In civvies?
With civvies, yeah. Showed up at the Marine Corps detachment there, you know, and they go, "Who is this guy?" You know? And so, and of course, then you get some uniforms at the exchange, and they sent me downtown to one of the uniform businesses there. And
What was the training like then at Pensacola? Did you do
Well,
ground training or?
I'll tell you, it started out, well, number one, they only started so many Marines every week in the program. And so we were backed up. So I didn't actually start at any actually, you're a naval aviator or naval aviation training till the spring or early summer of 1967. But we had what we call the pool. And so you were in the pool until you actually started. And so you started out with, I remember right, ground school, you know, a certain number of weeks, and then you have survival training, and then you have actual primary flight training. And if I remember right, and I know this is right, that you have to get out of survival training, you have to be able to pass the swim test. And there's and I'm not much of a swimmer, but there were several things you had to do that besides be there, if you know what I mean. I mean, they had survival training, out in the boonies at Eglin Air Force Base and stuff like that, but you had to pass the swim test.
Did you have to float for so many minutes? And
Oh, that was part of it.
Mhm.
But the problem I had is with the strokes. So I always say I had to go to grad school for a week. And basically, you had to swim a mile in a flight suit. And it took me 3 tries. I did, and it involved 72 lengths of the training tank. And so, of course, if the first time you try it, everybody in your class is there, and okay, go! And of course, people jump in and go, and that was too much for me. I went about half a lap or whatever it was, and I'm struggling. And so one of the things you had to do was swim a mile in a flight suit. And so by the time I made it, there was 2 or 3 other guys in the pool with me. And so I backstroked the whole mile, And then there was the strokes test. You had the freestyle, you had the breaststroke, you had the side stroke, and the backstroke. Of course, for me personally, the backstroke was because I could just kind of float, And then you go.
At least you could
along.
breathe that way.
Yeah, you breathe that way, back and forth, 72 lengths of the pool. And then finally, I passed the strokes test too. And so that put me in a different class because you're held back a week,
Oh,
Yeah. And so once you get the survival training done and your swim stuff done, and then you have the pre-flight school, which they tell you all about the physics of flying and stuff like that. And then you go out to Softly Field, where you fly the T-34, which is basically is a Beechcraft Bonanza with a standard tail and a tandem cockpit, instructor in back and then student in front.
mm.
And you did that, and you got 10 or 12 hours or 14 hours of flight training there. And so one day you're doing touch and goes, and he tells you to pull over and stop. And he gets out, and then he's, okay, take it around. So you take it around, and that's your first solo actual, but your first solo flight where you take off from Softly Field, just you yourself, to go out and fly, takes place the next flight after that.
Mhm.
And so I remember how many hours we had in the T-34, but one of the funny things that happened when I was there was a guy named Paul David, and of course they have a thing called a wheels watch, and so they want to make sure your gear's down when you're coming in for a landing, So, and if your gear aren't down, they wave you off. And so I can remember the story was, he's out there in a pattern, and his gear's not down. They wave him off, And then they try to contact him on the radio, but there's no response. And so he made 3 or 4 passes with the gear up, And so finally he comes around, his gear's down. And they go running out there. Lieutenant David, what's the matter with you? Didn't you hear them trying to contact you on the radio? He says, no, I couldn't hear them. He says, because there was this horn blown in my ear.
With the gear up horn, right?
Yeah, if your power's back and the gear's up, the horn goes off. He says, no, I couldn't hear it. There's some horn going off in my ear. But so that, some of the stuff that you remember about those first times are is what you remember, And then from there, we went to the T-28. And so, about the same time, and I don't remember I had any sessions in the T-28 or not, but they had tryouts for the football team. And so I said, well, I'm going to try out for the football team. So, tried out for the football team and made the football team. And as it turned out, if you made the football team, you were kind of special. You got special treatment. And one of the special treatments is that the football coaches were your instructors. And
Your flight instructors, you mean?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So that was kind of a positive about being on the football team. Not only did you meet new guys, and of course some of them had played football, Big Ten football, one of Naval Academy football. I can remember some of the mainstays on. I was fortunate enough to be a starting linebacker, and the other linebacker was a Annapolis grad, great guy.
what was his name?
Woodington or something like that. But then the quarterback on our team was Roger Staubach, and so so there was all kinds of advantages, and you got to travel, At the end of the year, we made a trip down to Mexico City to play Mexico City Polytech.
That was
Staubach,
Starbacker. Was he a Marine or Navy?
Navy.
Okay.
Naval Academy grad though.
Oh, okay.
But he's assigned to Pensacola. He's a supply officer. Of course, then he went on to a career with the Dallas Cowboys.
Right.
And so we finished. So the whole time we were playing football, the coaches were the instructors. So you had it kind of a little easier there,
Mm-hmm.
and they showed a little bit more patience. And so we had a good time with that. And of course, then when that's over, I can think one of the things, flying the T-20 at the R-1820, they've got these, what they call, I think it was, if your engine started coming apart, you had this chip light indicator. So if a chip light comes on, meaning there's something in the oil that, you're in, something.
Metals in the oil and jamming things up.
Yeah, and so we were up one time and this chip light comes on. And so, thinking,
What kind of aircraft was this in? Where
T-28.
T-20? Okay, the radial engine.
Yeah, R-1820.
1820.
And if I remember right, the emergency procedure was, power back this, let's take the pressure off this engine, power back, and take her home. And so as soon as that chip light came on, it was instructors, I've got it. I'm thinking, okay, you got it, And the next thing it was balls to the wall. I'm thinking, what is this guy doing? But we made it back, and later I asked her, says, whatever happened to that chip light we had? Well, that was ready to fall apart. We're lucky we made it back, And then another thing I can remember one time about the instrument training in the T-28. And we were going to make a cross-country trip to Thompson Field in Jackson, Mississippi, and do an instrument landing. And so they had a GCA, I think it was, or something like that, too.
Ground controlled approach?
Yeah. And so they have this hood that you put it down. That's it, you can't see out, but you can see the
It's not
instrument.
just the hood, it goes all over the,
Oh, yeah, it's a
cockpit?
hood over the whole cockpit.
okay.
And so everything's going along fine, except that this hood, when you, and I think the hood wasn't down for a majority of the trip, you know, but then going to make the approach, hood comes, okay, put the hood down. And this contraption that holds the hood down is spring loaded. And of course, what do most springs have? Little hooks to hold them in place, right? This hook got caught in my flight suit. And so I didn't have it trimmed up like I wanted it, you know. And so I'm flying with one, and I can't get my hand on the throttle. And when you can't get your hand on the throttle, you can't talk on the intercom. So,
And you can't land very good if you got full throttle, right?
no, and so anyway, so I'm thinking, what am I going to do here? I can't get this thing unhooked, and if I let go with my stick, I can't trim yet. And so and so finally, you know, you're below the glide path. You're below the glide path. You're below the glide. Next thing is, I've got it. Instructor says, I've got it. What's the matter back there? I said, you won't believe this. But I said, my flight suit got hooked up on this spring that holds the hood in place. Oh. So, you know, that's this kind of stuff you remember, you know.
It was nice to have the instructor with you, right? on
Yeah,
that
oh
one.
yeah. So, anyway, I've got it, you know.
What kind of aircraft did you transition to then in helicopters then?
The H-58. Then that's like the whirlybirds. It's a glass bubble, two passengers,
mhm.
like you see on MASH.
Oh, yeah.
That type of helicopter.
Yeah.
That's the first one that you fly, and you solo that bird, and so that.
This is a piston engine helicopter, right?
Oh yeah, up and on, down and off. You know what I mean by that? It means, of course, on your collective, which is your power. It's if you want to put more power on, actually, what you're doing is. You're also increasing the pitch in the blades, so you need more gas. So it's up and on, down and off. That's the first thing they teach you. And up and on, down and off, up and on, down and off. And I don't have a lot of memories of that as far as funny things happening, you know, like in the T-28. But then from the T-28 at Allison, you go to the H-34, which at that time, there were still H-34s in the Fleet Marine Force that were flying, you know, in the fleet. And
This is a Sikorsky aircraft, is that right?
yeah, H-34, which was still flying and still being used tactically at that time. And this would have been in 1968. And my primary flight instructor was a guy named Ken Holm, H-O-L-M. As it turned out, while I was in HMM 265 at Phu Bai, he joined us there. And so there was a guy that had made the complete circuit. He had been to Vietnam, went back to Pensacola, and then back to Vietnam. And so he was...
Second tour then.
Yeah, second tour. And so, you know, while I'm at Allison Field, you know, I met my wife, and then we got married a week before I got my wings. So I got married a week later, got my wings, and then I was Marine Corps aviator or naval aviator, whatever you want to say it, and then got orders to Marine Corps Air Station Santa Ana.
Did you take CH-46 training then at Pensacola too?
Transitioned to the 46 at Santa Ana, California.
Okay.
At that time, there were no what do you call them? You know, jet or rotary jet engines. They're not jet engines. They're
Turbine engine.
yeah, jet turbine engines in Pensacola. As far as what we were flying in the training command, it was not until I got to Santa Ana
Oh.
where we transitioned into the CH-46. I think there were Deltas back then, and forgot how many hours. We had a little over 200 hours when we got our wings, and then probably less than 100 hours to transition to the 46, and then my wife got a job teaching school in Tustin school system for when I was overseas, and she stayed with some other wives that we've kept in contact over the years. And then October of '68, got orders in the Westpac in Vietnam. The thing I remember most about going over there was a guy I keep in contact with this guy today, a guy that matter of fact stayed in the Marine Corps, was a career Marine officer, and eventually became the commanding officer of HMX-1, which flies the president around. So he flew the president around. But anyway, he drove a Porsche. And so I had to catch a flight out of country at Travis Air Force Base.
Up by Sacramento.
Up by Sacramento, wherever it is, San Francisco or whatever. And so I had to get to a small airport, not LAX, another airport nearby,
Orange County, maybe?
somewhere that had commercial traffic to take me up to wherever I needed to go. And so he picked me up that morning, and his car wouldn't start. We live in the same apartment building, and oh no, I said, this car won't start, I'm gonna miss my flight. I'm gonna miss movement, they're gonna be pissed at me. But fortunately his car started at the time, and he got me to the airport on time, and away we went.
What was your first memory then, Denny, when you arrived in country there in Vietnam?
My first memory, well, just to back up a little bit, I remember we stopped in Hawaii but didn't get out of the aircraft. And then we went to Okinawa for a day or whatever. And the GG shot that we got. And
Gamma globule?
yeah,
Globulin?
whatever it was. And it was like they injected some golf balls in your butt. And so, but I remember getting on the plane in Okinawa and going to Da Nang and seeing all these guys, and some of them were, at that time, I thought, these are really old Marines. These are old guys. And of course they're looking, and I'm looking out, not really knowing what to expect. And then when I got down there and checked into wherever, I don't still remember where I checked into. Oh yeah, you're going to Phu Bai. And so I got on a helicopter or whatever it was and flew up to Phu Bai and then checked in at Phu Bai at HMM 265. Couple days what they call to acclimate before you actually did any flying.
Now, again, was this a regional airport at Phu Bai, or what did they call that?
Phu Bai.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a military at the time, in a way, military airport. It was Army on one side, Marine Corps on the other, and of course there was no commercial traffic there.
No.
But there was CIA aircraft that worked out of there too. CIA.
Air America?
Air America, yeah.
The DC-3s or what?
And they had these short takeoff and landing turboprops that were there. And I remember right too, they also had some of those 810s there. And but we just had one side of the field. I remember having to take a truck from one side of the field because we were offloaded on the Army side. It might have been an Army helicopter I went up there on,
Mhm.
and then I had to get a truck around the other side of the airport, check in there, and I can still remember the first flight as on a quote admin mission. That you had to do this and do that. I can still remember that we've flown low level all around Da Nang and hit the top of a tree. A guy named Bill Hayes was the aircraft commander, and we're scooting around the tree top level, literally, and hitting the top of a tree. Of course, it wasn't doing any damage, but that.
Oh, did you get the rotors?
Oh no, your rotors are above you.
Yeah, they didn't hit that. The rotor didn't hit the tree.
No,
Okay.
no. But then afterwards, then it becomes after a while, a couple of days, it's the real thing, It's, I still remember the first Medevac. I remember, of course, they issue you a survival weapon. And so it's the issue of Model 10 Smith & Wesson 4-inch barrel, the same thing that you and I got issued as
Revolver.
revolver, pure agent. But I'm looking around, all the guys, some guys had Thompson submachine guns, some guys had shotguns, some guys had grease guns. I'm thinking, I just soon have an M14 or M16, I mean. Oh, that's no problem. We'll get you one. Okay. So next day, crew chief, here you go. Where'd you get that? He says, we pick up permanent routines all, KIA. He says, and now he throws his M16 on with him. He says, he's not going to need it anymore. And there's no record that it didn't get lost in the bush. He says, here. So I carried M16 as a survival weapon. I wired it to the back of my seat for the rest of my tour. I remember that, that much, And then, some guys had 45s, so. But getting back to, like, I still remember the first Medevac. In that I can remember we're out there doing something else other than Medevac, because that's, you do what you have to do. And so we got to, hey, go pick up this Medevac. So we always get a zone brief before we get in, And so
The people on the ground that were briefing you as to what to
Yeah.
expect.
Yeah. So I still remember, when's the last time you took fire in this zone? Well, we've never taken fire in this zone. How long have you been there? Oh, we're on the move, but we've never taken fire in this zone. Okay. What's the nature of your Medevac? Booby trap. So a guy stepped in a booby trap, got his face was half blown off. And I go, oh my God. And so I still remember looking back and seeing this guy actually walk on board. Half his face is blown off. I'm going, this poor guy. He get up this morning, everything's hunky-dory, he's perfectly healthy, and now his face is half blown off.
But he actually walked on board?
Oh yeah, yeah. And I'm thinking, holy cow, But that's what's happening over there, And so it's there's some other medevacs that will always stick with me. I can remember one time we're doing what they call, like the medevac standby. That's all we had to do that day.
Mhm.
Up at Vandergrift Combat Base, which is up just below the DMZ. And so a lot of these medevacs, when they happen, there are helicopters out in the area, and so they hear about this, they'll go grab the guy. So you're back at the med aid station.
They're sitting on the ground
We're
waiting,
sitting on the
and
ground waiting, but
other people are taking the medevac.
yeah, but so
Yeah.
you're not always flying around, put it that way. I can remember thinking the same thing about the guy that got his face blown off. They brought this guy in. We're sitting there, we're just standing by our helicopters, and the guy comes off. And evidently he took a 50 cal through both knees, and then his legs are hanging there by literally skin. Blew his knees just all to hell. I'm thinking, same thing about the guy with his face blowing off. I said, man, I said, this guy got up this morning, everything's hunky-dory, and now look at, you know. And then then there's the other side of this Medevac thing. When they got this call, you know where High Van Pass is?
North of Da Nang, yeah.
Yeah, just above there. It's right above the bay there.
Yeah.
So I get a call. I'm matter of fact, just fueled up, you know, at Marble, because that's where we refueled.
Marble Mountain, then south of Da Nang. then.
Marble Mountain, yeah.
Yep.
And so, hey, we got a Medevac for you out by High Van Pass. Go pick them up. And so we go out there and locate this unit that he's with, and the mountain is really steep where they're at, and the trees are growing up straight up, and so they're like tucked into the mountain, and so there's no place to land, so we had to put a horse collar and a jungle penetrator down, but my cable wasn't long enough to get to the ground. And so, what are we going to do, you know? And so finally the radio operator says, do you want the Medevac to climb up into a tree? Because the reason you couldn't get down low enough to the tree is because the mountain was too steep there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're tucked right up against the mountain. I says, well, isn't it supposed to be emergency Medevac? He says, it is. And you're going to have them climb to the top of the tree? He says, oh, yeah. I says, well, what's the nature of your Medevac? He goes, bee sting. I says, so this guy climbs to the top of the tree. We lower down the horse collar or jungle, whatever it was we were using at the time. He hooks on and up we go, and away we go.
Where did you generally take your medevacs in?
That's at the Medevac pad there in Da Nang.
In Da Nang, then
That's, you know,
the NSA.
unless you're up by Quang Tree,
Yeah.
then it's wherever, either Quang Tree or at Vandergrift.
so naval support activity Da Nang is where
Yeah.
near Marble Mountain, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, it was right near China Beach, which is famous, because they had a TV program about China Beach.
Yeah.
Then another medevac we had, and I was pissed. I was a section leader at the time, you know, so a section leader means you've been around a while.
Did you have 2 helicopters in a section,
Yeah, in
or?
a section, yeah.
Mhm.
So you never send one out alone, at least we did.
Mhm.
And so I had night medevac off the Iwo Jima. And so we had inserted these, I think it was 9th Marines or whoever it was, for an amphibious assault, you know, all helicopters. And of course then that night, I was on standby, you know, of course you're not awake, you go to bed just like you normally do, but you wake up about 3 o'clock in the morning. Hey, wake up, emergency medevac. Oh, okay. You know, so get your crew out there, you know, and you're all set to go anyway, you know, but take off and go flying in there. And so anyway, I says, well, do you have guns? Which I mean, we have gun cover out here, you know, like, which means you got any Huey guns out here going to cover me while I go in at night and pick your guy out of there. No, we don't have any guns. And so I call up the controller in Da Nang. You guys got any guns to send out for this emergency medevac? No, we don't. So fine, it's you got to go in because you can't wait for guns because there aren't any guns. And so I can remember making an approach in there, sand flying all over the place, and it's tight, you know. And finally get it set down and open up the back ramp, and next thing I hear on the intercom was, Lieutenant Langkos, the medevac just ran onto the helicopter. I go, what? The medevac just ran onto the helicopter. I says, this is supposed to be an emergency medevac.
Not walking wounded, huh?
He wanted to go to Da Nang because he's going to go to R&R the next day. I go, I wanted to say, hey, make this guy an emergency medevac, because you got two crews out in the middle of the night. One of the crews is risking their life going in there, landing in this hell-forgotten place with trees all over the place, sand ball all over the place, and your medevac runs on board. You know, give me a break. You know, he can go to R&R anytime. You know, they'll make sure he gets his R&R. But so we took him. You know, we got him now. You know, so it was. So like I say, it's all different kinds. You know.
Did you do a lot of supply runs too? Then?
Oh, we did
Any,
everything. We did
food,
we did combat
sea rations.
resupply. We did amphibious or aerial assaults, recon, recon extracts and insert. We did everything. The 46, you know, did everything.
How many troops could you put on a 46?
Well, it all depends on how hot it was, and all depends on what your altitude was. If you're at altitude and it's hot, you can't carry as many as at sea level, and it's cooler. It's good because you just don't have the power at altitude and higher temperatures. So you have a chart. How much fuel do you have left?
Your weight, in other words.
Yeah. How much fuel do you have left? What's the altitude of the zone?
Density, altitude.
Yeah, and all that stuff. You know, so you.
Well, what would the maximum be then at, say, sea level and standard?
Your max gross was 24,000 at that time.
I'm sorry, the maximum number of troops?
Maximum gross.
Well, gross, so
Helicopter and everything.
2,400 pounds?
24,000.
1,000 pounds, okay.
And in 2003, I went to a reunion down there, what they call Papa Smoke reunion. And it was basically composed of Marine Corps air crewmen from Vietnam.
Mm.
But they had static displays. And so I'm talking to one of the pilots there. So he talks about all these new powerful engines they have. And you go, well, what's your max gross? Oh, 24,000. I said, yeah, but you got a lot more power than you did before. He says, yeah, but actually says our cargo capacity is less because we've got so much more anti-missile stuff on there now that because we didn't have to worry about handheld missiles when I was in Vietnam. We could fly at 2,500 feet above sea level or above the ground, and just about you pretty much didn't have to worry about ground fire. But not the same in 2003. You know, when as far as the 46, you know, in the wars that they were fighting. So actually, the airframe was as good. The max gross was the same, but as far as your useful weight, as far as cargo, was less because of the anti-missile stuff.
24,000 pounds is 12 tons.
Right.
That would include your fuel.
And your crew.
The crew.
So fuel and
cargo.
crew and aircraft, and so you had charts there. It's so many degrees centigrade. You know, your altitude is such and such. We can carry so many 100 or 1,000 pounds. You know, and what happens when you're overweight? You, if you're, for example, if you're underground and you're overweight, you pull up and you can have power enough to get off the ground into a hover, but as soon as you go what they call out of ground effect, then you don't have enough. Yeah, exactly.
This is tape number 2 of the interview with Dennis Langkos.
Too, I have memories about.
Okay,
We all set?
you're on.
Okay. One of the medevacs that I remember is that we were flying around and doing some missions near the Ashaw Valley. Have you heard of the Ashaw?
Right.
And so there was this unit in contact that had an emergency medevac. And they were in contact. So we went flying in there and landed. and loaded up the Medevac, and we didn't take any fire going in. But of course, you know, you don't exactly just turn around and fly back out the way you came in. You have to keep going. And so we just took all kinds of fire. A machine gun opened up on us, and I'm going,
Once you got airborne again?
once we got airborne, as soon as we started to lift off in any kind of altitude at all, they opened up on us. And the first thing you do, obviously, is look at all your gauges, you know. We're still flying. Everything looks good. So get on the speaker or the intercom. Is everybody okay back there? I says, anybody hit? He says, yeah. One of the guys took a hit. I says, who was that? Which guy was it? He says, the Medevac. So that's one of my stories is the Medevac got out of there in worse shape than he did when he got on the aircraft.
So the round came up through the bottom of the aircraft?
Yeah, right. He was in a prone position on a stretcher, and but I'm sure he made it, you know. And then I can remember doing a hoist job north of the rock pile, which is just right on the DMZ, where a guy took head wounds, and so we had to. There was no zone, so we had to do a hoist job. And he was in bad shape. He was in such bad shape that we, instead of taking him to Quang Tri, we took him out to the hospital, shipped direct. And so, as soon as we landed there, I mean, there were surgeons right there on the flight deck started working on him. And then one other time we're doing a Medevac, I was a wingman up on the DMZ. And so I'm circling around, you know, you circle around while the other guy is putting his butt on the line, you know, get them thing. We're just fat, dumb, and happy, you know, but as much as you can be. And clouds kind of limited your above ground capability. So all of a sudden, kaboom. And so we took a hit. And then when you take a hit, and it's a good hit, I mean, you know it. And so.
What altitude were you at then when you were hit?
Well, I think, I don't know, but because of the clouds, you couldn't go any higher.
So that was holding you down then?
Probably about maybe 1,000 feet above the ground.
Okay.
Anyway, when we got back to Phu Bai, the round had hit the aft pylon and actually had gone up the outside of the skin. You could see, and it's obviously a big round. I'm thinking, man, we're lucky that we're walking away from this one, you know. And another thing that not impressed me, but you just don't realize how much fire you're taking. You can imagine at any one given time in milliseconds, a blade is about that wide, and going around, there are 25-foot blades, and they're going around at a rate of, believe it or not, 265 RPM, okay? You can get back at the end of the day, and the body of the aircraft is taking no hits. There's no holes in your body, or body of the aircraft. But there's all kinds of holes in those rotor blades where
Nicks. No.
No, the holes.
Holes?
Yeah. And you can say, man, like you say, at any time in that, two discs, you know, because you got a disc in the back and a disc in the front. And at any one given time, how much of that disc is occupied, is physically occupied. But yet, a number of bullets have found their way.
The round just happens to hit it.
Yeah. It's just.
Now, are the blades, are they metal or
Yeah,
were they
they're metal,
synthetic? Or?
But some of them, well, most of them, they're hollow, though. But the spar is more solid with the front part. And then, of course, the back part where it tears off, they're thinner, you know, or the metal on them is thinner.
Almost honeycomb in there, aren't
Yeah,
they?
kind of like that,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So. And of course, when we were out there, one thing I didn't come up with is that I was fortunate, and I survived 2 46 crashes when I was over there. And you
Two
saw,
of them?
two, yeah, you saw the picture of the second one. First one, I don't know, have you ever realized, or have you ever experienced where things actually slow down for you?
In your mind? Yes.
No,
Yeah.
they actually physically slow
Physical.
down. They don't physically slow down,
Mhm.
but your adrenaline is such that your system speeds up. So things, you think they're happening slower than they're happening. And that happened to me the first time, first crash. We were in Operation Mead River in I think it was 19, do you remember Mead River?
I do, yes, yeah.
And so we were extracting Marines from this location at the end of the operation. And as it started to get dark, and you keep coming in and going out, there's fewer and fewer Marines in the immediate area, and the gooks get they get braver. And so we started taking mortars in the zone and all that stuff. So I was a co-pilot at the time. And so all of a sudden, I realized, not I realized, but what happened was all of a sudden we're making an approach and there are mortar rounds sitting in the zone and all that stuff. And we're being shot at. But all of a sudden we start to roll over and tip. We're still airborne, but the body aircraft's going like this. I'm thinking, and at that point, that's when things got
So the control system was
something happened.
without it.
But things all of a sudden are slow motion. And I still remember to this day. And I still remember thinking, you're going to die. And then you're on your side, on the ground, and the aircraft is literally beating itself to death.
The blades are hitting the ground.
And they're breaking off,
Breaking
so
up.
it's just stubs, but they're still hitting the ground, and you're still shaking. I mean, and your circuit boards are coming down, and our armored seats, which were meant for crashes, are just meant to stop bullets. They've separated, and the pilot is crunched over, and he's. My memory is that I kind of had to hold him out of the mud, and then it stops, and it's quiet for about 2 seconds, and then the next thing you know, your crew is trying to get you out, and so they open up the thing, says the pilot's on the right side, and it's on the right side. He's down, and our seats have separated, so my seat's on top of his seat.
You're on top of him, in other
Yeah, I'm
words.
on top of him, and the crewmen, they both got Bronze Stars for doing this all under fire. And so the emergency exit all of a sudden pops open, and they pull me out. And they hand me this 50 caliber Harrier 50, because by that time, our wingman, or lead, I forget which one we were, but I'm thinking, what are they doing over there? They're about 100 yards away. But anyway, they pulled me out. I look back, and here there's aviation fuel going up in the air and coming back down in the hot engine. But we don't catch fire. Thank the Lord.
Huh.
And so they said, here, take this 50. There's our partners over there. So at that point, I start running.
Carrying a 50 caliber machine gun.
50 caliber machine gun. And I found out right then that adrenaline can only take you so far. And there's all kinds of fire going on, so I said, the heck with this. So I took that 50 and just dropped it and ran as fast as I could. And then they did the same thing with I don't know if they gave him a 52 or not, but then the crew all was rescued by our partners, in the other aircraft. And then in the second crash, I was a pilot, and we just lost power coming out of the zone, and mushed in, and it rolled over and started on fire. And you saw pictures of that, but that were probably my most memories of.
On the second crash, were you able to get all the crew out also?
Oh, everybody got out. Yeah, there were no KIAs in either crash. probably the first one, you know, could have been the worst because of the situation where there was enemy fire.
What caused the fuel to spurt up? Any idea?
Well, there were vents. You know,
Okay, the pressure
yeah,
from the crash.
the vents.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you know, like that. You know, and that's in the back of the aircraft is where the fuel tanks are,
Mhm.
and so that's, you know, it's coming out of the vent, coming straight up and back down. You know,
Amazing.
yeah. But my other, of course, I remember R&R, and I got so upset because it's supposed to be time in country. And of course, everybody who's married wants to go to Hawaii. So my month came. So my wife makes arrangements to go to Hawaii. Then the new CEO, or new commanding officer, he says, "No, you're not going." I go, "Well, why not?
There's your time.
My time in, I'm on the top of the list, or close to the top of the list. There's so many for this squadron, and I'm at the top of the list." He says, "Well," he says, "you know," he says, "there's enlisted men who haven't gone yet too." I said, "Yeah, but I got more time in country than they do. Doesn't make any difference, they're going ahead of you." So I had to go to the next month. I was so pissed, you know.
Sounds like catch-22.
Yeah, you know, yeah, but there, you know, but I think we should, you know, there's more enlisted men in the squadron than there are officers, so I think that we should send more enlisted men than officers. You know, you're the boss. You know,
Well, how can you argue with that?
yeah, yeah.
Why don't you tell me about R&R? You know what
Well,
what that was all about.
My wife's a school teacher, and so originally we were supposed to go in August, and even though that, I'm just going to give an example here, okay?
Sure.
We may have had 5 slots that could to go to Hawaii that month,
Mhm.
and so I was in the top 5. But the commanding officer took it upon himself that because that there were more enlisted men than there were officers, they just said more enlisted men than their officers. So I was informed that even though I was in the top 5, and we had 5 slots, you're not going. And so I had to go the next month. But so the next month comes, you get your slot, you know, orders, whatever you want to call it. And my wife met me there, and we stayed at a place called the Waikiki Inn, and just had a great time. She had a great time, and you know, you just enjoy getting, because you're married a little over a year, you know, and stuff like that. And so well, we just, you know, a good break. My wife kind of had a funny story. So she's flying to Honolulu, and she says, "Yeah," she says, "I can't get over some of these girls." I says, "Well, what do you mean?" She says, "Well, there's this lady sitting next to me, and she started to look at my pictures of her husband, and she says, 'Yeah, and here he is naked, and see, he's erect.'" And so my wife goes, "Oh yeah, that's real nice." You know? So, but anyway, it's a great break, you know, but you have to go back, you know.
Give you a chance to be a civilian for a week or so.
Yeah,
Right?
civilian for a week ago. We did everything on the Oahu. We didn't go to any other islands, but it was just an enjoyable time, you know. And then, of course, then we spent the last 3 months or so on board the Iwo Jima, which I talked about that one Medevac or the guy.
Now, your helicopter was based on the Iwo Jima?
On the Iwo Jima.
Right.
It was the Iwo Jima class carrier, which is what they call an LPH,
Mhm.
landing platform helicopter. And so we, I think the group that, I think they had two companies of Marines on, actually on the LPH, and then they had other craft that had like 2 landing spots, but they also had 2 companies of Marines. So, and then you did unit, did assaults or whatever,
Mhm.
But they were, when we were on the LPH.
So your quarters were actually on the LPH.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
you weren't at Phu Bai,
Yes.
or you might have
Yes.
gone into Phu Bai, but it was not.
Yes,
You weren't
and
based
that
there anymore.
Here's what made it nice, because you got a clean rack every night. You didn't have to worry about it being mortared and rocketed at night. So that was nice. Plus the food was not that the food was bad at Phu Bai, because it wasn't. It wasn't bad. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But you had not to be racial or anything, but all the stewards on Iwo Jima were Filipinos, and of course you ate in the officers' wardroom and all that stuff, and there was a sandwich bar there. You can go at midnight if you wanted. They'd make you a sandwich, and so it was nice. But one thing, and there's a lot of poker playing on board, when you were there, and against the rules, a lot of drinking too. And so I can remember one time, of course, you run out, and so you send a guy in on if there's a aircraft going to China Beach, give him a sea bag, and you send them with your order, So we sent this guy in with an order, I think I had a 5th of Johnny Walker Red or something like that, And he goes to China Beach and gets everybody's order, and comes back. And of course then, that night, it gets kind of rowdy in the quarters. And it just so happens that the CO of the grunts, the infantry guys,
Mhm.
he slept in the same area we did, and it woke him up and it disturbed him. Of course, the next morning, he complains to our CO. And so I'm sure our CO knew what was going on. But then he says, okay, guys, he says, whatever you have.
But your
planned."
CO had to take some action then, right?
Yeah. He says, okay. He says, all the booze you got left, over the side. So we had to get rid of all the booze over the side, It was,
And what were your quarters like at Phu Bai on land when you were
it was Quonset huts, like
there? Around Quonset.
semicirculars or whatever, yeah.
Yeah.
Air conditioned. For the officers at Phu Bai, it was pretty nice, because, matter of fact, the living is pretty good, because the only night flying that you had to or had to do, was what they call the mortar watch, which means that, I think during hours of darkness, they had a helicopter overboard watching for rockets and mortars and stuff.
Mhm.
Very rarely do you ever see
So when
it.
you were up in the air, you'd be able to see the mortar launching or
Yeah, and
rocket.
of course, if there was an attack,
Yeah.
and you didn't see the initial attack, they could direct you where to go, So every once in a while, you had to, quote, fly the mortar watch, which was 2 hours at a time, which you call hot refuel. There's 2 hours of fuel on board these aircraft, or usable time. So you flew around for 2 hours. You shot practice GCAs and practice touch and goes, and just flew in a circle for 2 hours, watching for mortars and rockets and stuff. At night, that was a consistent most of your night flying, was this mortar watch.
Would you do just one of those 2-hour tours, or did you go in to refuel and go back up again?
Like what you did was, at the end of the 2 hours, you went down and you went to the refueling station, whatever that bump they had there, and then another crew came out, and so then you're done. So if you didn't fly, like if you're flying the mortar watch, that was your watch for the day. So
then you could go back to bed and hit the rack, right?
But other than that, I mean, you got up in the morning, and if you were to fly that day, a guy came and knocked and woke you up. Hey, go down to the ready room and get briefed. You're flying tomorrow or today or whatever. Usually knew ahead of time if you're flying the next day or not.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd go up, fly either up by the DMZ or down by Da Nang and do your missions. And at the end of the day, fly back, have chow, of course. And they had an O Club, you know. The USO claim there every few weeks, USO show. You know, so it was
How many people did you have in your crew?
4. Usually 4. 5 if it was a designated Medevac. Then you'd have a medic on board. Yeah.
So there would be 2 enlisted men, crew chief, and
3.
3, and then
Well, then, you know, when I say 3, you had a crew chief, gunner, and your medic. If you're a designated
and a pilot, co-pilot.
pilot, co-pilot.
So
yeah.
4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah. There's one other story I'd like to tell about
Okay.
flying up there. One day we're out flying and doing missions up by the DMZ. So at the end of the day, you call up with your what they call DASC. I don't know what you guys call them. Some kind of control. You know, it's just like
Mhm.
command and control. You know, you call in and say, Quang Tree DASC, Quang Tree DASC. This is High Boy such and such. We've completed our missions. We're going home for the day. So Sam Kelly was my flight leader, section leader. Okay. And so Sam says, "Okay, what do you got?" He says, "Go over to such and such zone, which is right on Vandergrift Combat base, and pick up their 6. He wants a ride to Phu Bai."
This is the Regimental 6?
Yeah, whatever it is. But he was the
A colonel.
yeah. Okay, so we go flying over there. We both land. This nice big zone, you know. And so Sam gets on the radio and says, "So and so and so and so, whatever their call sign was. This is High Boy, whatever our call sign was. Our general call sign was High Boy, like it was 32-3 or 32-4 or whatever." He says, "We're ready here to pick up your 6. And so nothing said, and finally they says, "This is High Boy Son, so we're here to pick up your 6. Voice comes back over the radio. "Our 6 tells us to tell you to shut down and come on in for a cool one." Sam says, "Well, we're in a hurry. It's starting to get dark. We want your 6 to come out here so we can give him a ride to Phu Bai." He says, "Well, the 6 says to come in for a cool one." Sam says, knowing Sam, you could probably, "Well, you tell your 6 that if he's not out here in 5 minutes, we're leaving." So, "Oh, okay." You know, so a few minutes later.
Did you keep the rotors going
Oh yeah,
for
yeah,
5
we're
minutes?
turning. We're ready to
you're
go.
turning.
And so, and it's getting dark. You know, we don't like to fly at night. We don't have to. So this guy comes out. He's a bird colonel. And he comes. I see him running toward my helicopter. So I lower the ramp. He comes running in. Oh, I take that back. Before that, after Sam says that, the guy comes back and says, "My 6 wants to know your name and unit number." Sam goes back and says, "This is Lieutenant Kelly from HMM 265. If he doesn't have his ass out here right now, we're leaving." Okay, so that's when we see the guy come running out. And so the guy goes running onto my aircraft. Of course, he has to run the full length from the back up to the front.
20, 30 feet, right?
Yeah, whatever it is. And he goes, "Lieutenant Kelly?" And I go,
Other bird.
I don't say a word, I just go. And so he goes running out the back, running up there, and I can see the
Ramp up.
ramp, no, the ramp's down.
Oh, yours is still down?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but after he left, of course, oh, and so then I see him running to Sam's aircraft, and of course Sam's got his ramp down. And the next thing I know, the colonel's going this, but Sam is going, I can't hear what's going on, obviously. And then up goes the ramp and away we go. Because I don't know if you realize it or not, but on a military aircraft like that, unless you're a general grade officer, the pilot is in
Is still the
command.
pilot in command, right?
But I thought that at the time was so funny. You know, if you tell you're 16 out here right now, we're taking off.
So you left him.
No, he ended up going with us.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, but he ran to my aircraft because I thought, oh, it's Kelly. He wanted a piece of my ass, you know.
Okay, going back to the first crash in Denny. You were wounded there, I understand.
Correct.
That
And
point.
the action, because that's what they figured caused us to crash.
Mhm. Then you received a Purple Heart then for
Yes,
that.
yes.
Okay. Okay. Were you awarded any other medals for bravery or?
Not necessarily bravery per se, but got a single mission air medal one time. And that is when I was a co-pilot and the pilot got a DFC. And then of course,
Why was that awarded then?
why?
Why?
I don't want to get into that.
Okay.
It's
And then
just-
you had other medals
It's
awarded?
just
also?
that it happened, there was another co-pilot besides myself, they're up for what we call hack checks, aircraft commander checks.
Mhm.
And that day we were out there, make sure we could handle things, you know.
Mhm.
Are you experienced and good enough to be an aircraft commander? And there were two majors that were the aircraft commanders that day, and they make the decisions. So, enough said, at the end of the day, we're asked to write those majors up for DFCs.
Distinguished Flying Cross.
Yes, yes. And then we ended up with single mission air medals.
Oh, I see.
Now, whether or not they deserve DFCs,
That's another question.
Put it this way, I lost a lot of respect for those two majors. Just like how I felt about John Kerry getting a Silver Star. I don't think he deserved a Silver Star.
Okay, we won't go there.
Okay.
Were you ever prisoner of war?
No.
Okay.
No.
What sort of casualties did your squadron suffer there?
Well, I replaced a guy that was killed in action. He was a co-pilot. His name was Willie Hale. And he and the pilot and all the crew and all the passengers were killed in the midair. Well, 2 or 3 weeks before I got there. And I knew this co-pilot fairly well.
The two aircraft hit each other then?
Yeah, it was an H-34 and a 46. They had it midair. But the first casualties in the squadron while I was there, guy named Bill Emerson, Captain Bill Emerson, and he was one of these guys that everybody wanted to be like Bill Emerson or Bing Emerson. He was a stud. And he was a captain, believe it or not, of the Harvard football team. And he was the grandson of Ralph Waldo Emerson, or at least a descendant. And then the co-pilot was John Harrell, was a co-pilot. And he and those two pilots and the crew and all the passengers were killed in an airborne assault on Mead River. And I can still remember had been there a short time, and I knew this big assault was coming up, and we were launching every aircraft that we had available. And I'm thinking, man, I don't want to miss out on this. I would like to go with Bing Emerson. And of course, they got hit by an RPG, and they crashed, and we're all killed. And we had other people killed. one crew flew into the Da Nang Bay at night, and whether it was why they went into the water, I have no idea. And we didn't have a lot of other people that I remember that got killed when I was there. We were very fortunate. Like I said, we were very fortunate we didn't have to fly night medevac. And so, and we flew alphas, which were the lower powered. And so we weren't asked to do a lot. Well, number one, no night medevac. And so we were kind of like, well, if we need some more stuff done, we'll ask these guys.
Now, why didn't you do night medevacs?
Because there weren't any Marines where we were at night. All the Marines were around Da Nang, they had 3 or 4 squadrons down there, or were up on the DMZ, and they had squadrons and helicopters up there. There were no Marines other than the air wing at Phu Bai.
Okay.
So,
How long were you in country in Vietnam then?
a year, from October 68 to October 69, and that's when we started to pull out. The Marines started pulling out, and one of the first ones they pulled out, they used the Iwo Jima to pull them out on.
And you were already on board the Iwo Jima.
And so we loaded up a bunch of Marines, took them to Okinawa. I got off in Okinawa and took a plane back to Conus, back to Marine Corps Air Station El Toro. And that's where my wife was still teaching school again. And then we had orders from there to Marine Corps Air Station New River. And so we drove cross country and ended up being assigned to initially HMM 365, which is a really good experience for us, or me, I should say, because we went on several deployments in the summer of 70. I got there, I think it was November of 69, and in 70, we were in a deployment to the Mediterranean, and that's when they had that big earthquake in Peru. And so we did a lot of the disaster relief on behalf of the United States in Peru. And so we actually went through the Panama Canal to get there, and then did all these relief efforts. And then we got back, and then in the fall we're supposed to take part in a NATO exercise in Turkey. And we no more than got underway is when they had the Jordanian Civil War in 1970. And so, we're going, all the pilots in the squadron at this point were Vietnam veterans. And so every one of us were helicopter aircraft commanders in our own rights.
And again, you were in CH
46s.
46 at that point. Okay.
And so the next thing we know, there's a couple 46s take off and come back, and we've got technicians all over our aircraft installing armored plate, armored seats, this and that, and go, oh, come on, man. I just came back from that last year. And so
back to a combat zone.
Yeah, back to a combat zone. And so our mission, should we choose to accept, not our mission, was that the Army had a MASH unit in Jordan. And if they ever got in trouble, it might be overrun or something like that, we were going to fly in there over Israel and into Jordan and rescue those people. Fortunately, it never came to pass. Not that I don't know how bad it would have been if we had to do it, but.
Were you part or supporting a battalion landing team at all, or was it separate from that?
We originally were supposed to go for a NATO exercise.
Okay. Oh yeah.
But then, as it turned out, we just floated up the coast of Israel for a long time. until this thing was over. And so, anyway, so highlight there though is that our wives had joined this military travel club. And so they could get round-trip airfare, I think, to Frankfurt or somewhere in Germany, from New York to Germany, and round-trip for $200, you know, at the time. So my wife was one of those. I think there must have been like a dozen wives of the squadron. And so then, once this thing was over, our first port of call was in Naples. So our wives met us in Naples. We spent a night there. Then we took the train up to Rome, spent a couple nights there, then took the train to Munich, and then the next day we went down to Berchtesgaden, where the Armed Forces Recreation Center. And that was, that trip in itself was, man, that was great. I mean, not only being with your wife again, but the scenery, the fact that it was Bavaria, Germany, and then we took the train back to Munich and then caught another train to Barcelona, where the ship was going to be. And so we caught the ship again. Unfortunately, the ship was about the schedule and what the information we had was a day apart. But if we had to wait another day, we'd have missed the ship.
What ship were you on at that point?
It was either the Guadalcanal or the Guam, one or the other.
Okay.
And so that was a great thing there.
So you had, what, about a week or so of R&R there in the various cities, or more than
I
that?
think it was what, 10 days.
10 days?
Because the ship was still in Naples when we left,
Mm-hmm.
and then they had to cruise from Naples to Barcelona, and that's where we met them again. And then the wives, they had these Eurail passes, and so they're off again, you know. And so, and then of course then we had to take the ship back to Kaunas, you know.
Mm.
And, but that was good, you know. But I think we had these patches made up, you know, HMM 365, 1970, something like so many oceans, 5 continents. You know, it was a big deal, you know. But the biggest deal was Peru. And then when we finished our thing in Peru, we cruised down to Lima, the capital. Do you remember the Tuna Wars? Or news about the Tuna Wars?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I mean, we were the first U.S. man of war to land in Peru since 1947, because the relations between the two countries weren't very good. And I remember while I was there, this businessman had some of us over for dinner, and I got a piece of pottery that was pre-Inca. I still have it, you know.
Now, operating a helicopter in Peru, isn't that high altitude in Peru generally?
Well, there was believe it or not, the Pacific side of Peru is pretty dry. And so we were anchored in off of a city or town called Chimbote, which there was tremendous damage there. And then there was like canyons, or a big canyon, valley, whatever. If you went like kind of like around, and then most of the people we were helped was in that valley behind the first ridge, or up in the mountain too. They were both, all kinds of.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't personally see it myself, but there was this one town, evidently, there was a lake there, some kind of water impoundment that the earthquake caused it.
Flooded?
Flooded, and the only thing left of the town was a cross above the mud. I didn't personally see that myself, but I can remember that the Indians there, they're glad to see you, you know, obviously, and they smile at you, and I was amazed at the gold teeth that they had. And so that was a great time. But there was this one guy in our squadron that told the CEO, says, look, he says, I tried this yesterday, and we can do this. He says, take off from this ship with your load and go to max power. And he said, max continuous power, different thing, okay? He said, and that, instead of going way around and to get to the people you're helping, he says, we can go over these mountains. And they were like 18,000 feet high. He said, because it wasn't like straight up, you know, but he says, but if we go to max continuous power, he says, we can get over this ridge. Sure enough, you could. And so that's what we did. Went to max continuous power, and then up over the top of the ridge, and basically shoot an auto rotation down in the valley several thousand feet below, and unload your load, pick up people that need to be picked up, and fly back.
Hmm.
A lot of the slides I have are those of that. But I can remember like landing at 16 or 17,000 feet and shutting down, you know. And one thing I remember too about one of the first times we went up there, you know, that we were flying on this this roundabout route, how quiet it was. And you could still see dust in the air that was just sitting in there from the earthquake. It was weird. But people there were really happy to see you. You know.
So you're hauling supplies in and
Taking wounded people back.
People back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vinny, how did you handle the stress, particularly during combat in Vietnam? The stress of flying and the stress of combat?
Well, it's something you're expected to do. You just, you know, like, put it this way. There are some guys, one of my jobs was, besides flying, you have collateral duties. Okay, I was in the operations section, so what I had to do, one of my things was prepare the schedule for the next day. And so you knew pretty much who could handle what.
Hmm.
Like we have one guy, his name was Dick Hubbard. And whenever an assignment came up where, you know, the missions came down from death, not only did he want to do it, but you know he could handle it. You know, so if a recon extract or extract came up and, hey, get Hubbard, you know, that type of thing. Some guys, you just didn't let them fly at night. You know, like on board the carrier, you know. It's okay to fly at night when you're flying the mortar watch. But as far as when you're on the LPH, you don't, there's some people you just didn't want to fly at night, and you didn't assign them to fly at night. Like,
So you knew who could do it and who couldn't.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
oh yeah. You know, it's just like, you've heard people talk about things in Iraq or Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
You hear about these commanders saying, I hate to lose so-and-so, but you know, you need your best guys to be on the point. You don't put a shipper down the point. You know, and you hate to, I don't mean to refer to anybody that's there as that, I'm sorry about that, but there's some guys that you just know that are gonna do a better job at doing that than others,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
But did you personally experience stress to the point where, you know, it was not debilitating necessarily, but...
I'll put it this way. You know, after that first crash,
Mm-hmm.
the first times you go out after that, you ever heard the term shaky? You're shaky,
Mm-hmm.
you're you know, like, it's not a term that many civilians use, but it's a common term in military, I think. You know, you're a little bit shaky, even though, yeah, it's just like, you're shaky, you know.
You don't particularly want to live through it again.
Yeah, but then, you know, after 2 or 3 times, you know, the shakes are gone. you know, and a lot of times you just don't know what's going to happen, you know. It's just, you know, I don't know if you heard the term or not, but flying helicopters, it's hours of boredom surrounded by moments of stark terror.
And everything's pretty much compressed too, so you
Oh,
really
yeah.
you don't have too
Yeah.
much time to think about
Yeah.
being shaky.
Yeah, yeah. So it's, and then there's some guys that, you know, just didn't want to do it. I've had guys, pilots, that kind of like DOR'd after they got to Vietnam. I've known kind of guys like that, you know. And, you know, we had, you know, they have what we call a snivel log. You know what I mean? It used to be a sniveler.
Yeah, yeah.
The snivel log. Put your name in the snivel log, and then in particular, they were field grade, you know, like majors and above. Put it this way, majors. Would always say, "Don't fly me tomorrow," and then you got to put a reason. I sing it's Sunday, and I sing in the church choir. So they sniveled, they didn't fly. And then there was another major, I got a safety investigation I'm working on. Don't fly, you know.
But they had some reason.
They had some reason, you know, so they didn't want to hang it out there every day or put their name available every day, put it that way, you know. And of course there's some reason to be a sniveler, like I'm going to be on R&R, I'm going to be gone. You know?
Mm-hmm. Denny, after the service, did you join any aviation groups or VFW or anything like that? Or
there's a group called Papa Smoke, which is comprised of Marine air crewmen from Vietnam, or Vietnam air crewmen that I belong to. I'm not currently a member. I think Brand's a member. But they didn't have one this year because of the COVID virus, but they usually have an annual convention or annual get-together. The last one I went to was in 2003 in Pensacola. And of course, you know, the Vietnam War lasted basically from the mid-60s to 75. And so the people that you knew in Vietnam is just 1 year in that 10-year period. And so I remember seeing guys that were there when I was there, and you usually try to get together by squadron, you know, but it's usually not too many people that you know are at these get-togethers. You know,
because you did one of the 10 years then.
Yeah,
so
of course, there's people coming and going all the time. But as far as people that you're close to, you know, you probably served 8 months together or 9 months together or whatever, you know, and then you're even more you're closer to the people that lived in your hooch. You know, like there was, like I'll never forget our hooch mate, Missy Tron. But then there's also the guys that lived in my hooch that you actually socialize with, because in the back of your hooch you have a refrigerator, you have it full of beer or whatever, you know, that you know. So it's not like you have contact with every guy in your squadron every day, you know, much less get close to them. But you know, but it's always nice to go to those things, and you know.
Backing up a little bit, did you generally fly with the same pilot or co-pilot, or
no, you
change?
who with you are assigned.
Okay.
Like the scheduler writer, like
Mhm.
was my job to get the missions come down from DAS, and then first thing you do is look at the snivel log. Hey, who's not going to fly tomorrow? And then the next thing, well, what do we have for missions? Well, everything's going to be routine. And then so
you
mix up, you know, and
pretty much flew with everybody in the squadron then
but
throughout
like
the
say,
year.
for example, you won't put a brand new aircraft commander in with a brand new.
Yeah.
You put a brand new aircraft commander with an experienced co-pilot.
Mhm.
You know, so you mix things up, and likewise you never have. You never fly the same aircraft because you fly what's available, and helicopters are high maintenance. You know, it doesn't take much to put them down. You know, when I say down, you know, like you can have radio not working right and it's down. You know, or this gear here is beyond. It shakes a little bit, it rattles too much. You know, so you down the aircraft, put a new one in there.
So it'd be on deadline for repair and.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so it's not like you fly everybody the same day.
How many aircraft per squadron?
24. At least back then, we had 24, you know, and then maybe 48 to 50 pilots. But very rarely did you have 24 aircraft flyable.
Yeah.
I mean, put it this way, I was a test pilot over there. Could you fly them all? Yeah, you could fly them all. I mean, were that many of them safe? Yeah.
So right after the repair, you took them up
Yeah,
for the first hop.
I did test, yeah. So, I mean, it's a big deal, no big deal. Because, you know, for example, if you're out there testing, for example, your stabilization equipment, you know, because they're general. CH-46 very unstable, you know. Matter of fact, we just want to test a guy, new co-pilot, hey, let me turn the SAS off. And so then you're all over this guy, you know. And then after a while, you know, then you can fly SAS off. But if the SAS is off,
What does SAS mean?
some kind of stabilization equipment.
Stabilization equipment
Yeah.
system or something.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but it's not like it's going to crash, you know. But it certainly makes it a lot safer and a lot easier if it's working right. But if it's not working right, the aircraft's down, you know. And so very rare. And of course you can have, you can down it because there's a beat. You know what a beat is?
Cyclical.
A beat is
beat?
when, like, thump, 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 thump.
Mhm.
And if you took a
Like a bearings going out or something.
no. It's like these rotor blades have tabs on them, similar to ailerons.
Aileron.
And so
A trim tab.
yeah, like a trim tab. And if they're out of sync or now, see what you do, you put like a some kind of a thing on the end of the rotor blade. You could attach them there. There's a screw hole or whatever, and then you got this light. And then if you got a beat, you go out for a test flight, and the guy in the back shoots a beam out to the end of the rotor blade, and you can tell if every blade's in line with the other two blades. And so if it's high or low, you adjust that tab.
And you can identify what specific blade it is that has to be adjusted.
They're slanted. The tabs have slanted marks on them. And so you put this beam up there, it lights up the beam lights up those tabs. And you can see the tab, when you go to a certain point, you're looking at every rotor that goes by there, but you know which one's high or low because of the slant of the tab.
So one is always higher or lower than if they're out of beat.
So it's a beat.
Yeah.
Thump, 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 thump. Yeah. Or so you come back at the end of the day and you sign off in yellow sheet, hey, this thing's got a beat. And so you circle the down.
So that pulls it off the line for the next day while they do the maintenance on it.
Or they might even just do it on the ground. Just possible, but probably not. They're probably going to want to put it under power, you know, that kind of stuff. Or a radio might be out, certain type of radio, might be out or whatever.
How many children do you have then?
We have two.
Okay. When was your firstborn?
First one was Dennis Christopher. He was born in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, in August of '71. And the second one was born after I got out of the service and when I was in the FBI in San Diego, California.
What's your second son's name?
Mark.
Mark. Okay. How many grandchildren do you have?
3.
Okay. Where does Dennis live then?
He lives in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And he's also in the FBI.
And Mark, where does he live?
He lives in Saline, Michigan. And he works for a company called I think it's a DM Berg Group, and they deal primarily with school districts and whatever, and they provide building security, building maintenance, building cleaning, stuff like that. And then they also have a security side. And one of the big contracts right now is these people that guard marijuana grower operations. Believe it or not.
What did you do after the Marine Corps?
For a short period of time, I sold life insurance, and then.
How long were you a parole officer? You said you were a parole officer?
No, sold the life insurance. And so, anyway, for a short period of time, I sold life insurance while I had an application pending for the Bureau. And
It's for the FBI, right?
for the Bureau, yeah, FBI. Got accepted, went to new agent training, got assigned for San Diego for 2 years where our second son was born, and then got sent to Detroit, and then to Lansing, and retired in 2000.
How many years were you in Lansing?
From October 11th, 1977 until April 28th, 2000.
April.
And at the time, I was the longest serving agent in Lansing.
In Lansing, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And now the record's held by the current secretary there. She's been there over 30 years.
How did your service in the Marine Corps then, Denny, affect your values, I guess, and your belief in the country?
You certainly, have a strong belief in what your country's doing, and I hate the way to see some of our country, way it's going right now. But one thing I think I learned throughout my early years of my life, and it's kind of like didn't necessarily start with the military, but with playing team sports, and particularly stuff like football, not so much wrestling, but football, and in the Marine Corps, is that you learn to be a team player. And I find that to be a value, your willingness to help out the guy standing next to you if he's in need of help, more than anything else. And like I said before, there's things about Vietnam that you get emotional about, but I wouldn't trade those 5 years for any.
Mm-hmm. Good. Well, we're concluding the interview here with Dennis Langkos, a U.S. Marine Corps pilot during Vietnam. And this interview is being done under the auspices of the Library of Congress as part of the Veterans History Project. It's also being facilitated through the History Department at Grand Valley State University, Allendale, Michigan. And I, as the interviewer, am Wallace, or Wally Erickson, a volunteer interviewer. This is the end of the interview.